It was just another afternoon for Keanu Reeves, a rare break from his busy life. He sat quietly in a McDonald's in Los Angeles, enjoying the peace of a simple meal. The usual buzz of the restaurant surrounded him. Families chatting, children playing, and the familiar scent of fries in the air. Keanu had just spent hours at a charity event, helping those in need, and now he wanted nothing more than to unwind in peace. But everything changed when a small voice broke through the noise. A 5-year-old boy with messy blonde hair and a broken toy car clutched tightly in his hands walked up to Keanu. The boy looked nervous, unsure of what to do, but there was something about him that caught Keanu's attention. Then, with a voice barely above a whisper, the boy said something that made Keanu's heart drop. What the boy said next would send Keanu into action, a moment so powerful that it forced him to dial 911 without a second thought. The calm atmosphere of the restaurant shifted instantly. What started as an ordinary day for Keanu was about to turn into something far more serious. Stay with us to find out why this simple, quiet whisper ended up saving a life, and how Keanu Reeves became an unlikely hero when no one expected it. Keanu had spent the entire afternoon at a charity event, an experience he deeply valued. As a well-known actor, people often saw him as a Hollywood star, but what they didn't know was that Keanu found true happiness in giving back. The event was a fundraiser aimed at helping children from underprivileged backgrounds. Keanu wasn't just a figurehead. He actively participated, spending time with the kids, talking to them, and even playing games. His heart was in it, showing the world that, beyond the glitz and glamour, he was a man who cared. As the event wrapped up and the evening drew near, Keanu felt the weight of his busy day. It wasn't a feeling of exhaustion from the event itself. It was the weight of being constantly in the public eye. Keanu longed for a break from the spotlight, a chance to be just another person, not a celebrity. He wanted simplicity. So, instead of heading home or stopping at a fancy restaurant, he made a decision that might have seemed odd to anyone who knew him. He pulled into a McDonald's. The decision wasn't just about food, it was about finding a slice of normalcy. He wanted to enjoy a quiet meal in peace, away from the cameras and the noise of his fame. McDonald's, with its casual atmosphere, offered exactly what he needed. The buzzing sounds of the kitchen, the laughter of children, and the familiar smell of fries and burgers all brought a sense of comfort. For a brief moment, Keanu could forget about the fame and focus only on enjoying the meal in front of him. Keanu found a seat in a quiet corner of the restaurant, his back to the crowd. There was something about the hustle and bustle around him that felt oddly calming. It wasn't the chaos of a red carpet event or the tension of a film set. It was the everyday life of families grabbing a quick bite. Keanu let out a soft sigh of relief, feeling the weight of the world lift, if only for a moment. This was his time. Little did he know, everything was about to change. The boy's introduction and growing tension. Keanu's peaceful moment was interrupted when his attention shifted to the small figure sitting a few tables away. It was a boy, no more than 5 years old, with messy blonde hair that looked like it hadn't been brushed in days. His clothes were simple and slightly worn, as if they'd seen better days. The boy sat alone at a table, clutching a broken toy car tightly to his chest. The toy seemed to be the only thing that kept him grounded in the bustling chaos of the restaurant. There was something about the boy that caught Keanu's eye. The way he sat, hunched over, with a look of deep concentration in his eyes as if he was lost in his own world. But there was something else, something more unsettling. His gaze kept darting toward Keanu. The boy was watching him, eyes wide with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Every so often, he glanced down at the broken toy in his hands, as if it was his only source of comfort in a world that felt too big for him. Keanu noticed the boy's hesitation. It was clear that he wanted to approach but was unsure. His small feet shifted nervously under the table, and his hands fidgeted with the toy. The boy's eyes remained locked on Keanu, but there was something holding him back, fear. Fear that Keanu could see in the way he chewed on his lip, in the way his hands trembled slightly around the toy car. It wasn't until Keanu's gaze moved away that the boy gathered the courage to take a small step forward. But the moment he did, his attention shifted to the man sitting next to him. The man, who had been staring at his phone, looked up and immediately noticed the boy's movements. His eyes narrowed, and his posture stiffened. He was tall, well-dressed in a crisp suit, but there was something chilling about him. His face was hard, unmoving, as though he had perfected the art of suppressing all emotion. Every time the boy made a move, the man shot him a disapproving glance. It wasn't just a look, it was a glare, a silent reprimand that seemed to warn the boy to stay put, to not make a sound. Keanu observed the interaction from a distance. There was an unmistakable tension at the table between the man and the boy. The boy, despite his small size, looked utterly vulnerable. His shoulders hunched in a way that suggested he was trying to make himself as small as possible, as though he feared his every move would set off the man beside him. Keanu couldn't help but feel uneasy. Something about the situation didn't sit right with him. The boy was alone, save for the man beside him, who now seemed to grow more agitated with every glance he shot at the child. Keanu knew something was off, but he couldn't quite figure out what it was. It was the kind of tension you couldn't ignore, the kind that made your skin crawl, even if you didn't fully understand why. And in that moment, Keanu knew he had to pay attention. He wasn't sure why, but he sensed that the boy's discomfort was more than just a child's typical shyness. The boy shifted in his seat again, and this time, his gaze didn't leave Keanu's face. There was a sense of urgency in his eyes, but the fear of approaching was still there. The broken toy car was his only anchor to this moment, and Keanu could see it meant everything to him. As the boy stared at him, Keanu felt something stir within him, a protective instinct, something he hadn't expected to feel today. And yet, there was no denying it. The moment was about to change everything. The whisper that freezes Keanu. As the minutes ticked by, Keanu couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The boy, still clutching the broken toy car, was staring at him with wide, nervous eyes. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was desperation. Keanu watched as the boy hesitated, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. There was a battle inside him, a struggle to find the courage to act, but something kept holding him back. Then the moment came. With a quick breath, the boy stood up. His small frame was barely visible against the background noise of the restaurant, but his determination was clear. He walked toward Keanu with slow, deliberate steps, never breaking eye contact. The air in the restaurant seemed to grow still around them, as though the world had paused just for this one moment. When the boy finally reached Keanu, he stopped beside his chair. For a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. Keanu gave a small, reassuring smile, but the boy's trembling hands were still holding the toy car tightly, as if it was the only thing keeping him grounded. His eyes were wide, flicking nervously toward the man at the table, then back to Keanu. With a barely audible voice, the boy leaned in closer, so close that Keanu had to shift in his seat to catch the words. His voice was soft, almost drowned out by the surrounding noise, but the words still cut through the air. "He did something bad to my mom. Please help." The words hit Keanu like a cold wave. His heart skipped a beat as he froze in place, his mind racing. The world around him seemed to blur, and for a second he couldn't breathe. It wasn't just a child's plea. It was a cry for help, a desperate, urgent whisper from someone who knew they were in danger. Keanu's calm, collected demeanor faltered for the briefest of moments. The reality of the situation hit him all at once. This wasn't just a broken toy or a frightened child seeking attention. This was serious. This was real. And Keanu knew he had to act quickly. Every instinct in his body screamed that this was far more dangerous than it seemed at first. Without wasting another second, Keanu reached for his phone, his hands steady despite the surge of adrenaline rushing through him. He unlocked it and dialed 911, his thumb moving quickly over the screen. He knew that time was critical. Whatever was happening, whatever Ethan had just shared, it was something that needed immediate attention. As Keanu waited for the call to connect, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something far bigger. The sense of urgency was overwhelming. Something inside him knew that this wasn't just a boy seeking help for a simple problem. This was a situation that would change everything. The restaurant, once filled with the usual noise of families chatting and children laughing, now felt heavier. Keanu could hear the chatter around him, but it seemed distant, muffled, as though the weight of the moment had taken over. Every second that passed felt more tense than the last. Ethan was still standing there, looking up at him with those wide, fearful eyes, waiting for Keanu to do something, waiting for someone to believe him. Keanu knew he couldn't waste any more time. He had to act. Harris's intervention and growing danger. As Keanu was about to finish dialing, he felt a sudden shift in the atmosphere. A presence loomed over him, and he looked up to see the man from the table, Harris, standing. The cold glare in his eyes pierced through the calm restaurant. Harris's posture was stiff, and he walked toward Keanu with slow, deliberate steps. The air between them thickened as Harris's gaze never left Keanu's face. "Is there a problem?" Harris's voice was laced with authority, but his tone was icy. There was no warmth in it, just a sharpness that sent an unsettling feeling through Keanu. He didn't speak loudly, but every word carried weight. Keanu remained still, his phone now tucked back into his pocket, but his expression never changed. He studied Harris carefully, noting the stiff movements and the subtle tension in his jaw. The man was trying to downplay the situation, pretending it was nothing more than a child's overactive imagination. "Ethan," Harris continued, his eyes briefly flicking to the boy who was still standing at Keanu's side, "is just a curious kid. He's fine. No need to worry." But Keanu wasn't buying it. His instincts screamed that there was more going on here than Harris was letting on. The way the man was acting, his tone, the way he was trying to brush off Ethan's distress, didn't match the situation. Something was off. Keanu's eyes didn't leave Harris as he spoke calmly but firmly. "I think the boy needs some time. He seems upset, and he clearly wants to talk." His voice was steady, though there was an edge of concern in it. Keanu could feel the tension rising. Harris was clearly trying to control the narrative, and Keanu wasn't about to let him. Harris's eyes narrowed, the fake politeness slipping away. "I said he's fine," he repeated, his voice hardening. There was no mistaking the underlying threat now. Harris was growing frustrated. Keanu could feel the heat of the growing confrontation. Despite Harris's attempts to downplay the situation, Keanu's gut told him that the boy wasn't just upset over a broken toy car. There was something darker, more dangerous, lurking behind the surface. And the way Harris was acting, too calm, too controlled, made Keanu even more certain that the boy was in danger. "I think Ethan needs to stay here for a while," Keanu said, his voice softer but still firm. His body language remained relaxed, almost as if he was unaware of the rising tension. But inside, his heart was pounding. He could feel the weight of the situation shifting, becoming more dangerous by the second. Harris's jaw tightened, his eyes flashing with irritation. "You don't understand," he said, taking another step closer to Keanu. "It's time for us to go." Keanu didn't move. He wasn't about to let Harris take Ethan anywhere, not when he could sense the danger closing in. His every instinct told him that whatever Harris had planned, it wasn't good. The man's eyes narrowed in frustration, but Keanu held his ground. The conflict between them grew, silent but intense. Keanu subtly tried to buy time, his mind racing as he calculated his next move. The seconds felt like hours. He knew help was on the way, but for now, he had to keep Ethan safe from whatever Harris was planning. Keanu's calm demeanor never wavered, but deep down, he knew that things were escalating quickly. Harris wasn't going to let go easily, and Keanu wasn't about to back down. The arrival of help. Keanu's mind raced, but his movements remained calm and controlled. His phone was still in his pocket, and his fingers slid discreetly to the screen to send a quick message to an emergency contact. He didn't say much, just a few words confirming that something was wrong, that help was needed. As the seconds passed, Keanu kept his focus on Ethan, speaking to him in a soft, reassuring tone. "Hey buddy, it's okay," Keanu said, offering the boy a gentle smile. "You're safe now. Just stay with me." Ethan's small body trembled slightly, but he nodded, his grip on the broken toy car tightening. He didn't speak, but Keanu could see the fear in his eyes slowly start to ease. He continued talking, keeping the conversation light to distract him from the heavy tension in the air. Keanu's voice was steady, but his mind remained sharp, aware of the danger that still loomed just a few feet away. The waitress, who had been silently observing the situation, caught Keanu's eye. She walked over carefully, her hands slightly trembling. With a practiced motion, she placed a napkin on the table, but Keanu noticed the small folded piece of paper tucked beneath it. She leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're coming," she said softly, her eyes flicking toward the door. "The police are on their way." Keanu's heart skipped a beat, but he nodded, offering her a quiet thanks. The waitress returned to her post, but Keanu felt a wave of relief wash over him. Help was close. As if on cue, the door to the McDonald's opened, and two uniformed officers entered. They moved with purpose, their eyes scanning the room, quickly picking up on the tension surrounding Keanu, the boy, and Harris. The officer's presence was commanding, and the atmosphere shifted immediately, the air growing thicker with the weight of the situation. Keanu stood up slowly, his posture still calm but alert. He stepped forward, closing the gap between him and the officers, while keeping Ethan close by his side. "Officers," Keanu said, his voice firm yet gentle. "I think you should talk to the boy. He's scared, but he needs to tell you what's going on." The officers nodded, their eyes shifting to Ethan. The boy looked up at them, still shaking, but there was a glimmer of hope in his eyes now, as if the presence of authority had given him the courage to speak. One of the officers crouched down to Ethan's level, offering him a soft smile. "Hey there, we're here to help," he said, his voice calm. "Can you tell us what happened?" Ethan's gaze shifted from the officer to Keanu, looking for reassurance. Keanu gave him a small nod, silently telling him it was okay to trust them. The boy took a deep breath, finally feeling safe enough to speak. The revelation and police intervention. The moment Ethan spoke, the entire room seemed to fall into a heavy silence. The officer's voice softened as he leaned closer. "Can you tell us what happened?" His tone was gentle, trying to comfort the boy, who was still clutching his broken toy car. Ethan hesitated for a long moment, his eyes darting around the room nervously. He finally spoke, his voice trembling but clear. "He hurt my mom, and he said no one could help us." The words hit like a punch. For Keanu, it was as though the ground beneath him shifted. He had been sensing something was wrong, but hearing Ethan confirm it was a stark reminder of how real and dangerous the situation was. The officers immediately exchanged glances. They understood the gravity of the moment. This wasn't just a child making things up. This was a cry for help, a desperate plea from a scared little boy. Harris, standing just a few feet away, couldn't hide his growing frustration. His eyes flicked between Ethan and the officers, but his expression remained tight. The calm facade he'd been trying to maintain was quickly slipping. He stepped forward, trying to regain control of the situation. "This is ridiculous," Harris said, his voice strained. "He's just a child with an overactive imagination. None of this is true." His words came out harsh, like a man trying to convince others, and maybe even himself, that the truth was something else entirely. Keanu stood his ground, watching the man with careful eyes. He could see the panic rising in Harris, the way he was desperately trying to maintain control over the narrative. But it was too late. The officers were now fully focused on Harris, their attention unwavering. One of the officers, a tall man with a calm but authoritative presence, stepped forward. "Sir, we have probable cause to investigate this situation further," he said firmly, his eyes locking with Harris's. "I suggest you stay where you are." Harris's face hardened. He opened his mouth to argue, but the officer raised a hand to stop him. "We're not going anywhere until we understand what's going on. And you're not leaving either." For a moment, Harris stood frozen, his jaw clenched in frustration. He looked around, eyes darting to the door, calculating his next move. But the officers were standing firm, and the reality was clear. He wasn't going anywhere. Keanu could feel the tension in the air. Every second felt more loaded than the last. Harris was clearly desperate to escape, but the police weren't backing down. His attempts to push past them were met with resistance as they blocked his every move. Keanu kept his calm, but inside, he knew they were getting closer to the truth. Whatever had been happening, it was bigger than anyone had imagined. Harris was trying to deflect, trying to push his way out, but there was no escape now. The officers finally had Harris contained, and the situation was under control. It felt like the weight of the room lifted as the officers' presence solidified the reality that the boy was safe, that help had arrived. With Harris detained, the officers turned their attention back to Keanu and Ethan. "We need to make sure Ethan's mother is okay," one of the officers said, his voice calm but serious. "We're heading to their house." Keanu nodded, glancing at Ethan, who was looking up at him with a mix of fear and relief. "It's going to be okay," Keanu said softly, offering a smile. Ethan nodded, his eyes still wide, but a flicker of trust had replaced the terror that had clouded them moments before. The tension that had filled the McDonald's now started to dissolve, but Keanu couldn't help but feel a sense of urgency rising within him. Whatever was waiting for them at Ethan's home was a mystery. One thing was clear: they couldn't waste any time. The police car pulled up to Ethan's home, and immediately, the sense of urgency became even more real. The street was quiet, eerily so, and the house loomed ahead with its dark windows. The front door was slightly open, swinging on its hinges as if it had been forced. The officers exchanged a glance, their hands instinctively moving toward their weapons. This wasn't just a worried mother who hadn't been able to pick up the phone. This was something much darker. Keanu stayed close to Ethan, shielding him with his presence as they approached the house. Ethan's small hand was still clutched tightly in his, but the boy was visibly shaking. His eyes darted nervously from the house to the officers and back. Keanu crouched down, offering a quiet word of reassurance. "Stay close to me. We're here to make sure everything is okay," Keanu whispered, trying to keep the boy calm despite the growing tension. The officers moved swiftly, pushing the door open with caution. The silence inside was unsettling, the kind that makes your skin crawl. They stepped into the house, eyes scanning every corner. It was clear that something had gone horribly wrong. Furniture was overturned, cushions scattered across the floor, and the faint smell of something out of place lingered in the air. It was as if the house had been in the middle of a violent struggle. As they moved further inside, one of the officers called out. They had found Sarah. She was lying unconscious on the living room floor, her body limp and pale. There was a noticeable bruise on her forehead, a sign of an obvious blow to the head. Blood stained a small patch of carpet nearby, but what mattered most was that she was still alive. The paramedics arrived almost immediately, rushing to her side, and began working quickly to stabilize her. Keanu watched, his heart heavy with the realization of what could have happened if they had been too late. Ethan stood by Keanu's side, clutching his broken toy car like a lifeline. His eyes were filled with worry, but there was a quiet sense of relief too. At least his mother was alive. That was the most important thing. Meanwhile, the officers began to search the rest of the house. One of them went straight to the desk in the corner of the room and flipped open a drawer. Inside, they found a notebook. The pages were filled with details, dates, times, and descriptions of Sarah and Ethan's every move. It was obvious that Harris had been keeping track of them, planning every step with careful precision. But what caught their attention was the final part of the notebook. It outlined Harris's intentions to abduct Ethan, to take him far away from the safety of his mother. The discovery was chilling. Harris's intentions were far worse than anyone could have imagined. As the paramedics worked to stabilize Sarah, Keanu stood by, watching with a sense of helplessness. He couldn't undo the harm that had been done, but he could make sure Ethan was safe. He promised himself he wouldn't leave the boy's side. Harris had been arrested and was now being driven away by the officers, his face twisted with anger and defeat. He had tried to maintain control of the situation, but now his plans had unraveled. Keanu's role in protecting Ethan became clear to everyone present. Without his quick thinking, without stepping in when it mattered most, the outcome could have been far worse. As Sarah was loaded into an ambulance, Keanu walked with Ethan to the car. The boy had quieted, but his eyes still carried the weight of the trauma he'd endured. Keanu gently placed a hand on his shoulder, offering the smallest of smiles. "It's going to be all right, Ethan," Keanu said softly. "You did the right thing. You're safe now." The night was far from over, but Keanu knew one thing for sure. Ethan had found his hero, and that hero was someone who understood the importance of listening when others are in need. A hero's promise and a happy ending. In the quiet of the hospital room, Ethan sat by his mother's side, his small hand gently holding hers. The soft beeping of the machines filled the space, but it was the warmth of the room, the sense of safety that stood out most. Sarah, though still pale and recovering, was awake. She had been through so much, but thanks to Keanu's quick actions, she was alive. Ethan, still in shock from the events, turned his gaze up to Keanu, his eyes brimming with a mixture of relief and gratitude. "Thank you," Ethan whispered, his voice trembling. "You saved us. You saved my mom." Keanu's heart swelled at the words. He smiled softly, crouching down to the boy's level. "You did all the hard work, Ethan. You were the one who found the courage to speak up when it mattered. You're a hero, too." Ethan's eyes lit up at the praise, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he offered a small, shy smile. Keanu could see the relief in his expression, the weight that had been lifted from his young shoulders. It was clear that the boy now felt the safety he had been craving for so long. As the days passed, Keanu kept his promise to stay involved. He checked in on Ethan and Sarah, ensuring they had everything they needed to heal both physically and emotionally. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but he also knew that they weren't alone anymore. Sarah had begun therapy to deal with the trauma, and Ethan, though still shaken, was surrounded by people who cared. Keanu continued to visit them, offering whatever support he could, whether it was a comforting conversation or just being there when they needed him. Keanu's involvement didn't stop there. He used his platform to bring attention to the issue of domestic violence, which had touched the lives of Sarah and Ethan in such a painful way. Through charity events, donations, and speaking out, he helped raise awareness about the importance of providing support to those in need. Keanu didn't just want to be a hero for a single day. He wanted to create lasting change for families like Sarah's. Reflecting on the experience, Keanu often thought about how small acts of kindness could make a world of difference. He knew that one moment, the decision to step in and protect Ethan, had altered the course of their lives. But it wasn't just the big, heroic moments that mattered. Sometimes it was the quiet ones, the simple gestures of compassion and support, that had the most profound impact. Keanu learned that day how easily life could take a turn, and how one person's willingness to listen, to act, could change everything. In the end, it wasn't the fame or the spotlight that made the difference. It was the strength found in helping others, in showing up when it mattered most. As the weeks went by, the bond between Keanu, Ethan, and Sarah grew stronger. The trauma didn't disappear overnight, but their lives were slowly being rebuilt. The love and care they shared became the foundation for their future. And through it all, Keanu promised he would be there for them, every step of the way. For Ethan, Keanu wasn't just a celebrity, he was a friend. And sometimes that's all a hero really needs to be. Keanu Reeves' actions that day remind us all that even the smallest act of kindness can make a world of difference. In a moment of danger, Keanu didn't hesitate to step up and protect a young boy who was in desperate need of help. His bravery, empathy, and willingness to act showed how important it is to care for others, even when we're least expecting it. This story is a powerful reminder that true heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they're just regular people who choose to do the right thing when it matters most. It's about standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem stacked against you, and helping those who need it the most. Let Keanu's actions inspire you to look out for those around you, to listen carefully, and to never be afraid to lend a hand when someone is in need. If this story touched you, remember, there are countless others just like it. Click the screen to explore more moments of hope, compassion, and resilience that will leave you feeling inspired.